Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. Please roll to the front of the room with your food and drink. Ron, I'm expecting you to wrangle people back there. That's your job. So while everybody is heading to the front of the room, I just want to do some background. I'm Jen Rathburn. I'm a partner at Foley and Lardner, and I focus my practice on data privacy and security issues. For background on the Midwest Cybersecurity Alliance, we are a group of cyber nerds. Now, we are a group of people that get together and talk about hot cybersecurity topics, but we address them from a multidisciplinary approach, not just from an IT technical approach or a legal approach, but also from a risk management approach. We have meetings every other month. Our website has all of our prior materials. If you want anything about cybersecurity, we've covered almost the gamut in the past 4 years or so. Allison Jones, who's at the front desk, has all that information if you need it. And before we get started, I also wanted to mention that we do have information for continuing education credits, both for CLE and CPE credits. If you want credit-related information, Allison also has that at the front desk. Here is the information about our website. There's actually a sign-up form where you can go on and log in. You can also get access to all of those prior presentations as well. So before we jump into it, I just want to give a little bit of an update about some events that are going around here in town. Next week, ISSA is holding a conference, and that is at the Harley-Davidson Museum. And the actual head of ISSA is coming in. I'm speaking on a panel next Thursday, but the actual registration and sign up starts at about 11:30. So if you have any interest in that, I have materials up here from the ISSA. Some other events that are coming up, Terry and I are speaking about DCRA, Duty of Care Risk Analysis, for the American Health Lawyers Association in a webinar, and that's June 5th. I believe the same day as InfraGard, which is being held down in the Dells. So mark your calendars for that as well. I am also speaking at that. I just want to tell you a little bit about an event I spoke at last week. I spoke in DC for all of the FBI and the Fortune 500 CISOs through DSAC, which is the Domestic Security Alliance Council out in DC. And we've gotten some traction about starting an organization like this out in the Dallas area. And I want to turn it over to Aaron a little bit to talk about what he's been doing in Indiana.
Sure. So we've been in communication with a number of security leaders for some of the large organizations in the Indianapolis area. And we have had a couple initial meetings, and they are standing up their first couple of meetings down there for things that interest them from a security perspective. So we're talking to organizations like Eli Lilly, Andretti Motorsports, a couple of other large companies that are interested in talking like we do here, cybersecurity topics, and they are getting ready to stand up their chapter there. And then we've got a couple other irons in the fire, but we'll bring you.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to work with the Michigan Cybersecurity Council as well. We have contacts. The head of one of the women, Betsy Friedman, who is on there, she's from our DOD, and she's trying to coordinate efforts with us as well. So any ideas you have about coordinating the things we talk about here throughout different states, or getting grants, or trying to further what we want to do, not just from a technical legal perspective, but also a legislative perspective, please reach out to us and let us know, because we've been focusing on that. So moving forward on some updates, we always want to update you about state data breach notification laws. We have a free chart that we update periodically. We're updating it actually right now for Washington, but if you go and Google Foley 50 state data breach chart, you can look up your requirements by state. Just remember that it's not just the state in which you are located in, it's the state in which the individual's data that became affected by a breach is located in. So the way it works is you click on the state and you get an overview of the types of information that are covered. Obviously, we do the highlights. You need to engage your own internal legal counsel or outside legal counsel to work through this, but we just wanted you to be aware that this is available. We also think that down the road is you've heard about the CCPA, which is California law about privacy requirements. It's still not finalized, but it's going to be adopted. It's similar to the GDPR, which is the European law affecting privacy of EU citizens. We think that in the United States, we're going to see a similar patchwork of state laws like state security data breach laws. So we will be updating for that. On that note, I wanted to give you guys a heads up that we don't hold meetings over the summer because it's actually the only time where it's warm enough to go outside. And so we've learned over the past years that we don't hold events over the summer, but we're going to kick off our September event talking about the CCPA, which is a California law, which affects many businesses. It's not just if you're located in California, but we're going to do that with Terry and Haylock starting in September. We have a whole host of meetings planned for next year. We were thinking about after that September meeting, doing something in November. Actually, it was Tina Chang's idea from SysLogic, talking about the DNC and talking about the DNC from what is that going to mean to local businesses here? What are you all doing to prepare for all the security measures for this large, conference that we're going to have? And so we thought about, just talking about the DNC, talking about how we as a community are going to prepare for cyber or other physical security issues. So if you want to get involved in that and have any thoughts, please let myself, Aaron, or anybody else here on the board know, because we want to plan an event in November. So after this event, we're going to have a break in the summer, September, starting with CCPA, maybe doing DNC, and then we've got a bunch of others lined up. So one of the things I also wanted to point out is that Foley, we just issued an AI report. When I was in DC last week, the FBI mentioned this is one of their largest concerns about AI. One of the interesting things that they shared was that what they're really worried about is the fact that cyber attackers or our adversaries are actually changing the data that AI is using to learn about. So in other words, whatever AI you're developing in your company, they're actually hacking in and changing that learning algorithm so that AI actually learns incorrectly, which completely freaked me out when I was in the meeting, but makes sense that someone would be doing that. So anyway, we have a report that's out. If you're focused in the AI area, we as a firm are really focused. We're seeing lots of our clients develop products in AI, and we are following that. So today, we're going to kick off with Cisco, and we wanted to say thank you so much for being our co-sponsor today about IoT. We appreciate your support. I know you have some materials outside if anybody is interested in that. But essentially today, what we're going to do, we've got myself from Foley, we've got Andrew from Cisco, and we've got Aaron from Rexnord. Aaron's also the president of the Midwest Cybersecurity Alliance. But really what we want to talk about, like we do in every meeting, we want to talk about technical approaches to security by design. And security by design means how are you building that into your IoT products? It's something that the GDPR actually formally requires. Many organizations really are focusing in on security by design. I certainly think it makes sense. I'll talk about the changing legal landscape briefly. California really is the only state that has a law on IoT. It's pretty bland, but at least it's something there. But many states are looking to adopt requirements on IoT. So in addition to the technical security by design requirements, you have to think about how is the law developing. And then Aaron is really going to be practical, and he's going to talk about what Rexnord has been doing in the IoT space at the end. So now, kicking it off with you, Andrew, thank you so much. Here is the clicker.
I like to dance around a little bit when I present.
Well, and everyone
Hello?
knows.
Check.
Ask questions. Jump in, there's no interruption. We're trying to just figure this out.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for letting us attend this and helping us sponsor. This is a great event. Really looking forward to this conversation with you guys. And if you've seen me present before, it is a conversation with me. I hate slides. I have them today. But if you have questions, if you want to talk about something different, happy to take the direction, whatever you want to go. That being said, my name is Andrew Dio. I am the cybersecurity specialist for Cisco. For those that don't know who Cisco is, we are a small internet startup, really trying to break into the market, trying to do some unique things. People know who Cisco is, right? And if you've ever taken a meeting with Cisco, you know that we do not travel light. There's always an entourage, and I have one today. So Cisco folks, please raise your hands. All right. So please find us afterwards if you have any additional questions. There's many different practices here. But ultimately, my role at Cisco is I help organizations secure things, whether it's devices, whether it's the whole network, whether it's individual elements of an organization, right? I carry a sales hat, right? But I am an engineer by trade. I've been an engineer fundamentally most of my career, which comes a detriment when I'm having these kind of talks, because I will start using acronyms. Please throw things at me if you don't understand something I said, because I went too deep in the weeds, right? But ultimately, like Jen mentioned, we're here to talk about what Cisco is doing around IoT, specifically IoT security, right? Now, when you're talking about IoT and security as a whole, you always have to have one slide that scares the audience, right? So this is that one slide. When it comes to security, things are changing at a very dynamic pace. Everyone in this room knows that. I'm not going to sit there and tell you how dynamic it is and how big of an industry it is, right? But ultimately, things from a manufacturing, IoT, and healthcare point of view have changed since 2017. Gone are the days where people are just attacking things via Stuxnet and all this. Really, what they're using now is very advanced, very sophisticated malware. And the US government has actually outlined that about $14 to $18 billion of worldwide loss has occurred due to the impact that malware has had on organizations, specifically in the industries, manufacturing, healthcare, IoT industries, right? Highlighting some of those. Merck, pretty big name. We all know who Merck does, right? They lost $675 million in 9 minutes. Think about that, 9 minutes, right? From understanding the threat, entering the organization, to when it was finally remediated, $675 million, right? This is clearly not small potatoes. Maersk, in charge of 25% of world global shipping, down for 2 weeks, right? Think about the impact that occurred, all right? And the one I want to highlight is this one. You probably don't know who Mondelez is. Right? Mondelez makes confectionery cookies down in Chicago as well as some other places, but they're primarily in Chicago, right? And Oregon too? What's that? Oreo cookies, yeah. So Mondelez, all right, had a breach, right? Had a breach not too long ago, right? To the tune of about $100 million. Now, they did what anyone would do, right? They remediated it, they took care of it, right? Understood their losses, right? And they did what we would do if something happened to our house or car. They called their insurance company. In this case, their cyber insurance company, right? What's interesting about what happened to Mondelez was, who here is familiar with the term WannaCry? Right? Good. People are doing their jobs in the cybersecurity space. That's excellent. WannaCry, all right, probably impacted some organizations inside of this room today. I know many organizations that dealt with it to some degree, some greater, some lesser. Obviously, with Mondelez, they dealt with it with more of a significant impact, right? The problem they had was that when they called their cyber insurance company, right, the cyber insurance company said, oh, let us look into it, and they did not fulfill their end of the deal. Reason being is because we all know the rider inside of our home insurance, right, or our car insurance, right? If it's an act of war, natural disaster, or act of God, they're not going to fulfill it, right? The U.S. government determined that the WannaCry threat was actually sourced from Russia and was meant to attack the Ukraine as an act of war. So the insurance company said, we will not fulfill that. Mondelez is now currently suing that insurance company. It's going to a jury trial in next month or two, I want to say. And they're now going to have a jury of our peers determine what to do with this. But that is the danger and the dynamic nature of this landscape. So for those organizations that are leveraging cyber insurance, it's important to understand what you can and can't do with this. Because I have plenty of companies that I support, right, that go, I'm covered, I got cyber insurance, right? No, you still have to do your diligence. You still have to do all these things. You're gonna still need to protect, right? So now that we've scared you, let's talk about IoT, right? This should be a slide that's somewhat familiar to most folks, and it's a simplified version of the IoT stack, right? So on the bottom, you've got the things, right? These are the things that sometimes you guys build, sometimes you guys deploy. If you're a manufacturing company, you've got a lot of things in your organization. If you're a healthcare organization, you have a lot of things in hospitals, right? When you're thinking about IoT, and there might be some manufacturing, there might be some healthcare in the room, and there might be some folks who are like, I'm in neither one of those industries. Do I care? If you have an IP-enabled device, you have an IoT device, right? These are the things. But when it comes to how to manage those things, especially at a factory floor, there's the control layer. And the control layer, if you've ever analyzed these solutions, are really nothing more than really old Windows devices, right? And if you're dealing with really old Windows devices, you understand the problem with patching really old Windows devices, right? So this is a threat. Above that, obviously, you've got corporate IT, right? And what's new and what everyone's kind of dipping their toe in these days and trying to figure out where it fits in their organization is the cloud. So understanding how these four stack together is an important piece to understanding how to secure things, right? So the title of this presentation and why you're all here is security by design. So let's design, right? Let's talk about what that design entails. Obviously I work at Cisco. I deal with a lot of competitive solutions. I'm very familiar with the competitive landscape inside of cybersecurity, right? So a lot of folks will pull me inside, okay, we want to start with something, right? So where do I start when I'm thinking about cybersecurity? Oh, actually, rewind that. I added this slide last minute. Familiar with Industry 4.0? Anyone? Right? The Purdue model? Yeah, you guys are familiar with that. So what's interesting about this, right? And please don't ask me to pronounce that. I can't. Ultimately, though, what I like about this is there's a new concept, and this is a different piece from what the Purdue model ultimately brought. Down here is product. What's overlooked, and oftentimes, and I know Aaron's going to talk about this here in a bit, but most organizations overlook the fact that they're building these devices, and these devices sometimes what they call home. Think OnStar, think Nest, think whatever. I have a friend who had a Chamberlain wireless garage door opener, right? Really great idea. I have one too. He had to ultimately run a sniffer capture of his wireless network at his house to figure out why it was kept opening when it couldn't. It turns out he found a vulnerability inside of the wireless adapter for his garage door opener. He had to call Chamberlain and say, you got to fix this thing, right? These are the things that people don't consider when they're building the elements. But now with the Industry 4.0 change and them recognizing that product is a big part of that conversation, right? We are now in a spot where we have to start considering the callbacks and understanding now if the product is calling back to the organization, that is yet another threat vector that I need to consider. You know, everyone knows email is a threat vector, web's a threat vector, right? Users are a threat vector. But the devices that my company is producing, how is that impacting our ability now to, you know, secure the organization? Will somebody hacking my device ultimately lead to a breach of my organization? We have a whole practice at Cisco now that's dedicated. It's a room full of really, really smart technical guys, geeks, right? They sit there and they have every tool at their disposal, and their job is to hack into things. And what they're doing today is they're taking all these devices that you and I see, thermostats, garage door openers, right? Mobile devices, cameras, all these things, and their job is to figure out where the vulnerabilities are, right? So this is something that is very top of mind for organizations and something to consider.
And I just want to say one transition of that. I mean, and think about what all your tech geeks are doing at Cisco. Think about the average consumer. And when we get into where the law is developing is when does it become the manufacturer's responsibility to protect cybersecurity, and when does it become the actual user? And that's different if you're selling direct to consumers or you're selling B2B. But think about it. You know, these vulnerabilities, the average user doesn't think about. They just think, I've got this secure device they don't think about whether they have to do security updates, et cetera. But when you mention that, it just makes me think when we're going through this process, we're talking very technical, and everybody in the audience has some technical experience, but most consumers do not.
Who's read the EULA for anything?
Anything.
Anything.
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean, literally,
very
who's
good
read the
point.
EULA for anything? I mean, and Jen, to that point, yes, you're absolutely right. And right now, and the consumers and the manufacturers are wise to this, which is why they've buried that information inside the EULA. It ultimately, I think, right now, and I'm not a lawyer, I'll leave that to you, but ultimately, that's going to be probably at this point the culpabilities on the user, which in and of itself is scary because, you know, you guys, most folks, I equate my mother-in-law hasn't read a EULA in her life. Has no technical background, all right? But she's fully accepting these things and deploying these things and saying, hey, am I secure? No, you're not. Was there a question?
No, I was going to make a comment. I'm going to act as a consumer now.
Sure.
And you brought up the Chamberlain garage door opener thing. I actually bought one recently.
I did too.
And installed it.
I love it, by the way.
Yeah, I do too. and that was just a little aside. I was in Chicago, 8 o'clock in the evening before the holidays, and I was talking with my cousin, and she was asking me about the doorbells with the cameras and so forth, about the security.
I have one of those too.
What's good, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Ring.
So, yeah, that was one of them. And so I'm talking to her about it, and as I'm talking to her, I go to my phone to bring up my security cameras so I can show her on my cell phone the security cameras around the house, outside, and what I can see. And as soon as I brought up the 3 cameras, I noticed my garage door was open. Talk about panic. 8 o'clock at night in Chicago, and I live in Milwaukee. So
did your IoT devices talk to each other, meaning you pulled up your Ring and it triggered your garage door, or did you just simply leave your garage door open?
no, well, I don't think I left it open. I think what happened was something blew in as it was closing, hit the beam, and it went back up as I was driving away.
So that, I would say, is a pro that many people would choose to take risks so that they could close their garage door, even though someone could hack their garage door because of that pro benefit, which is what most consumers think about.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but do honestly people actually weigh the risk of these solutions when they go to Best Buy and buy something? Right?
No.
They're
No.
thinking about how cool this new device is. When I got my Ring doorbell, it was awesome. Right. When I got my Alexa and I was able to link all my devices into everything, it was really, I was showing it off to all my neighbors. Look at all the cool things I can do. And I'm a security professional, right?
Me too. I was like, you know what? I'll take the risk. This is very good.
I actually played with mine for a while, watching it go up and down, you know, sitting at the end of the alley and, you know, playing with it, you know, just to make sure that it was working and it stayed down. And periodically throughout almost once an hour, I would check my camera to make sure the door was down so that nobody had hacked that and gotten it up. But
And we're security professionals. Do you have a question over there?
Just so you know, if you have one of those, there's a setting on the Chamberlain that automatically garage door, no matter what, after you determine how many minutes it can stay open.
Yeah.
And then it sounds an alarm as it's closing.
It does sound
where
alarm.
does, I guess from a legal perspective, I want you guys to think about this when we go through it. And this is where the area of law is developing on a very basic level, is what is the manufacturer's duty to warn the consumer or B2B business about what you need to do with security controls versus what does the consumer require to do? And that's really the basis behind a lot of the legal developments, is where does that line get drawn? Like, for example, if I buy a piece of hardware like a laptop, I know that I'm going to have to update that. And I think it's very common that I have to develop my own, virus control or whatever. I'm going to purchase Norton antivirus, whatever else. But I don't think that people understand that in the same sense with patching and security updates. And it's almost like the cloud, right? What is the cloud service provider going to do versus the actual organization? It's the same thing with IoT, is what is the consumer end user business going to do versus the manufacturer? But anyway, that's what's behind all of this.
But also, I mean, the cloud,
Simple legal.
cloud said, if you buy into Amazon or Azure for a cloud provider, they flat out tell you security is your responsibility. It's right.
Nobody knows that, though, from a legal perspective.
I'm just saying,
so
it's
you know.
right there.
I mean, it's getting better.
Well, not only that,
And they're geo-tracking you
They are.
to arrest you for murder. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean,
That was
Don't you
awfully
have to
aggressive.
understand, though, that at some point in time, the consumer is going to presume that what they're buying is secure? And if the company knows that it may not be, isn't it incumbent upon the company, the manufacturer, to
are you speaking
notify?
product liability? I mean, this is,
Yeah.
I just want to say, I mean, we're still at the infancy level of legal developments in this space. I mean, when you get outed at DEF CON Black Hat because your IoT device is causing some sort of issue that's not, it's theoretical. And then it becomes a product liability potential claim through manufacturer. I mean, we're still on the infancy level of development of what's happening in this space. But that's what the law is trying to grapple with, is that, where does the manufacturer's duty end and the consumer or the business purchasing the IoT device begin? But
They should be then informing in their literature those limitations.
their EULA where no one reads it. I mean, I'm just saying that's where they do
Well,
it. Or
once
other warranty materials. That's what we've talked about.
But if it's in there, if it's written down, then it's incumbent upon the consumer to look at it.
I most
And if they
suggest
don't,
that
then they
in
pay
all
a
the things
price.
that I do. Go ahead. You have a question?
So I'm on the far side from a consumer perspective of like, I won't get an Alexa because I don't want anyone listening to my conversations, like, but I would love some of the conveniences of it. What about IoT in healthcare though? So if I'm a patient at a hospital, I'm not necessarily saying, okay, I'm going to read this EULA before you hook me up to this machine. However, the doctor takes the orders, I follow them, like,
I know a lot of this. So I started as a healthcare lawyer. I've spoken at the American Health Lawyers Association probably 5-6 years ago. Somebody that I was very close to had open heart surgery at the Cleveland Clinic. And I mean, Cleveland Clinic and large institutions like that scare me very much because you have dignitaries coming around the world where nurses themselves don't even understand that the infusion pumps, et cetera, are hooked up via internet. It's an issue. We follow it. Consumers don't have a choice. And so that would become med-mal related issue for healthcare institutions. We have the largest healthcare practice in the country. We do a lot of work with the largest providers in the country. And we run tabletop exercises about, this is not just I'm sorry, you have to notify somebody of a breach. Who cares? I mean, you're going to kill people in the event of if somebody really wanted to come in and hack those devices. And the HHS, OCR, they've done a lot of reports, including Senator Warner has asked the community. I have written responses back to Senator Warner on behalf of associations saying medical devices are a problem because a lot of them are legacy devices. There's no way without billions of dollars to many nonprofit healthcare systems that can update this issue. You know what I mean? But medical device companies and healthcare providers need to come together to come up with a solution. But yes, you are 100% correct that a consumer in that situation doesn't have a choice. It ultimately becomes a med-mal issue related to the healthcare provider. And I'm sure others of you, Ron, have some thoughts, and others of you in the healthcare industry. But yes, that is a different. That's not a B2C relationship.
And all that is, I 100% agree with everything that just said there. I personally support a lot of health organizations. I'm legitimately afraid. I'm not saying hospitals are bad and they don't go to a hospital, but ultimately, the amount of IoT and medical devices that are IP enabled that are not patched appropriately cannot be patched, cannot put an endpoint security solution on top of that. And the organization themselves don't have the resources to invest inside of just best practice stuff when it comes to cybersecurity concerns me. My father-in-law just had a heart attack and he got a pacemaker put in, and that's pacemaker. He was showing it off. He's like, it's got a cell signal and it can reach out to my doctor. I'm like, shut it off. He's like, what are you talking about? Shut it off. And he goes, and we are, and again, I talked about this earlier to somebody, I forget who. We are probably within the next couple of years, we're going to find out that a hacker will have killed somebody if it hasn't happened already. And again, I'm not here for doom and gloom, right? I'm trying to keep them somewhat positive, right? but that healthcare is an absolute concern and something that I'm incredibly passionate about trying to solve. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that just for this past weekend, they talked about IoT and medical devices, and also in the collective action problem, and they phrased that around everybody putting the onus on somebody else. And the keynote speaker went back to, and this went back to a song by Bob Dylan called, do you know this one?
I love Bob Dylan.
just love
What are you
those
talking
referencing
about?
songs
now.
It's my new theme song here. Yeah.
Who killed Davy Moore? Why and what's the reason for? And he was a boxer that died because, and they go, it's like, well, is it the ref's fault? Is it the contestant's fault? Is it the crowd's fault? The gambler's fault, et cetera? Who ultimately is at fault here? And they compared it back to what's going on in our industry. And additionally, they did also disclosed, to more to your point, that, yeah, hackers have caused loss of life.
And what speaks to your question is the answer is why? Why would they do that, right? Obviously, money is a big part of this thing, right? But if you kill somebody, there's probably not a money piece.
And I have one question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Terry, you're totally not paying attention, but I'm going to call you out on this one. So this IoT related issue, okay, so we're talking about duty of care, okay? So an organization goes through and sees foreseeable negligence, but hospital organization, for example, says, you know, this medical device, there is no patch, they won't offer anything. So in the event that the medical device purchased by the hospital kills someone, how do you address that from duty of care? That's a big question, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, actually, we've had that come up. Hello, hi, I'm Terry. Yeah, we've actually had that come up at a couple of healthcare organizations. I'm gonna have to see how we actually handle them on the risk register themselves. But I know we've definitely had that happen, and it's instead of the strict compliance, there's always a workaround. So there's usually some compensating controls, and we never get the risk down to an acceptable level. But it's either like you either have the device available or not.
The pro is to find cancer versus
Yeah, so
low risk of killing you.
in a mission like a healthcare organization, we're going to provide healthcare. Okay, yeah, there's a risk of the data and all that and things of going wrong, but if you don't have the equipment, you cannot perform that procedure. So there's a balance of the mission in this case, and so that's.
And I don't think there's enough opportunity for different manufacturers to have a competition in the market to be able to choose. I think that's the thing. It's that security and IoTs, I think security by design is a competitive advantage, which I want you to discuss later on. But I think eventually in 5 to 10 years, people are going to be choosing products based on their security by design or privacy by design
Soon
measures.
Cisco starts to test it in their lab and publish the results, you know.
Come on, get going. No.
But back to my point earlier, I have had the question of why would they do that, right? And the answer ultimately, as sad as it is because they can, right? If you've met these hackers and worked in that industry or talked to these folks, it's hubris. It's I want to show off, right? Now, thankfully, no one's been nefarious enough to do that to my knowledge yet, but it is a concern. It is a concern for all of us, and even at the manufacturing level. I mean, you turn off the wrong thing, it's a difficult thing. Utilities, huge. Right? If the power grid goes down because of a cyber attack, we're all in trouble, right? And that is a real threat. So, if you think about the grand scheme of things and how we have to better secure things, the point of, buying things because we know it's secure, I think there's an assumption that things are secure now, and that assumption should not be the case. So we need to push the manufacturers. We need to push ourselves if we are a manufacturer, and I know Aaron's going to talk about that as well, to make sure that these products, as they leave, are in fact secure. And then it's up to us as consumers to say, prove it, right? But there's not a lot of governance in that space right now, unfortunately. And that's the truth. All right. So unless there's any questions on that, thank you for the interaction. As I said, when someone asks me, help me secure my organization, help me secure my product, help me do something, they often ask me, where do I start, right? For those folks who are, in the IT, security buyer, there's a lot of logos on this screen that you probably recognize, okay? The problem with cybersecurity from a operations perspective, all right, and leveraging tools is there are too many tools, flat out, right? So when an organization says, yeah, I'm secure, and I go, okay, what do you have off this chart? And they start pointing at things, and I go, how many people do you have? What, I've got 3 guys. And you have 15 things on this chart? How is that even operationally sound, right? So I've been showing this slide or a version of this slide for the better part of 4 or 5 years now. The first time I showed it, you can actually read the logos, right? And this is, if I come back here in 2 or 3 years, I guarantee you, it's going to be bigger. Well, smaller font, right? But you look at IoT, that's IoT, right? And there's a bunch of players, and this is the problem, right? So you have all these point players that are looking to address one part of some function, some capability in the cybersecurity space, right? That's why there are so many of these things out there, right? IoT, they're probably solving one element. There's probably a focus on healthcare or manufacturing or identification of devices or whatnot. On the firewall side, you know, there are whole organizations that have started off based upon one capability. Same thing on the endpoint. So as organizations look to consume technologies and secure their organization because they have to, in fact, perform some action to prove to shareholders, to employees that they're doing some level of protection. This is the struggle that they're dealing with. And then if you're doing any type of M&A activity, I was talking to Aaron about this earlier, you're likely inheriting that person's mess as well, and you have to ingest that. So from an IT perspective, not even an OT, from an IT perspective, there's challenges that need to be addressed as a whole. So when you're looking at designing a solution that is secure, right, you have to think about things much more at a macro level, big picture. I equate it to a sundae, right? You got to build off something, right? Typically, vanilla is a good, safe bet off building on a sundae, right? Now, now I'm sure there's some cookies and cream and some peanut butter folks out there, right? But I don't think anyone's going to say that building off of vanilla isn't bad, right? So what we're trying to do here at Cisco is just that. Have you guys build off of something, right? And I joked earlier about how Cisco's a startup and everyone laughed, all right? Everyone knows who Cisco is, right? You've got probably your companies have Cisco infrastructure of some way, shape, or form deployed, all right? Build off of that. Build off of your network gear, build off of that infrastructure and what you get. So when you're designing things, again, think of it as a vanilla. Okay, so I'm going to get a little deep in the weeds on technology, and there will be acronyms on here. I ask questions, okay? But ultimately, solving IoT security, you're never going to do it at the endpoint level, okay? Because you can never, at least not now, until there's better governance and better, culpability with manufacturing to push these things, you're not going to be able to trust the healthcare organization or the manufacturing organization that the device is going to be secure until the end of time. Okay, it's just not going to happen. Now, things are changing, by the way. I was working with a hospital just last week and talking about their IoT and how they're addressing all the healthcare devices. And I said, can you patch all this stuff? And he goes, Andrew, that's an interesting point, because if you asked me that 2 years ago, I said no. But there's been a flip in manufacturing of healthcare where they're now allowing for endpoint security solutions, better patching capabilities, updated operating systems, and the ability to update these things. Now, when I say update, the manufacturer themselves is not responsible for updating. Best Buy is not responsible for updating your laptop, all right? So it's going to be up to those hospitals, those healthcare organizations to do the due diligence to perform these actions. That takes maintenance windows, that takes outages, there's all this liability associated with it, right? But it's getting better, right? But ultimately, if you're looking to design something IoT related, your best strategy is segmentation. It is separating and air gapping. It is making sure that that device can't impact something else, right? These devices are all designed to communicate to something, right? They should not communicate to everything. Does that make sense? All right. So when you're looking at things from my
Can I
previous...
ask you a question, though,
Absolutely.
but just practically?
Of course.
I love network segmentation because when you do data breaches and there's an issue, you're like, all right, this is all out of scope because you have network, you have segmentation. Is it as expensive as people claim it is? I mean, is that a realistic, thought? Is that practical? I'm just throwing it out there because that's what I hear. It's too expensive all the time.
Well, so expensive is subjective, but ultimately, no, it doesn't have to be. It can be, absolutely. It doesn't have to be. It all depends upon your segmentation strategy. So there's this concept inside of, there's a lot of old school thinking when it comes to security, right? Everyone thinks security equals firewall, right? Is not an unfair point, right? I'm a cybersecurity specialist. I deal with this a lot, right? If you are going to segment your organization by deploying firewalls, it will be very expensive, right? That's because those things aren't cheap. right? But you can absolutely perform segmentation, network segmentation, to do reduced scope of work or scope of breach and all this and risk mitigation in a more cost-effective manner. Now, it's not going to be cheap, right? But to do it the way I'm talking about doing it, right, is leveraging the tools that are already there. If you're going to rip and replace everything, yeah, it's going to cost money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but how do you leverage the tools? Sorry, I'm a lawyer. You know, I just dig in
Get it.
on these things.
That's
Exactly.
fine.
How do you leverage the tools? And you don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but again, I love segmentation, but I just get pushback a lot of times from clients, especially
Me too.
post breach, because I'm like, if you segmented your networks here, we would be in a much better shape, just from a scoping perspective.
So a firewall, in layman's terms, I'm oversimplifying this for all those cybersecurity, or those admins out there, and I apologize for simplifying it this way. A firewall is nothing more than a switch on steroids in many cases. Okay, so everyone has switches in every IT closet, right? Cisco sells a lot of them, right? It is not cost effective or operationally feasible to put a firewall in every closet. So if I can use the switch that already exists there and leverage the intelligence in there to perform that segmentation action, I don't have to give a very large investment in things that already exists. Now all I need to do is leverage and enable the intelligence of that switch to perform the segmentation action in a manner that doesn't require a lot of operational resources to make it all happen. Does that make sense? All right. So with segmentation, right, it's important to understand where all these sit. So this right here, this is the things part. That's where all of, and I'm simplifying this down to a great degree, but this network diagram, this is where the things live. This area here are where the controllers live. Those, like what I said, the Windows devices that you can't patch, right? You should put a little box around that, right? And segment that part off altogether, right? For those folks who are familiar with the term, right here is a DMZ. Right, so that's the corporate part. That is where your users live, where they, check their email and surf on YouTube and Netflix and all that stuff. In between is a DMZ, a demilitarized zone, because the security folks love warfare acronyms, right? So DMZ allows us to perform a spot where corporate doesn't talk to the IoT stuff, right? This stuff you can't trust. This stuff you also can't trust, but you also don't trust them talking to another. If I have that level of segmentation, that's a good place to start. That's right here, that's the cloud, right? Keep that completely off, and we're all really good at segmenting this part off because that's the internet. Everybody's organization already has firewalls in place, okay? We don't trust this. The whole walled garden concept, I call it the M&M security concept, right? Soft, hard candy shell, soft inside. We have to get away from that. So, we got these are firewalls, and these are infrastructure devices at the edge, all right? Again, costly, difficult to manage, difficult to maintain. We can't deploy it everywhere, but we need to be able to air gap my DMZ from corporate, because the thing about cybersecurity is you're never gonna solve it, right? And the reason why you're never gonna solve it is because you can't solve stupid. And that's a funny thing to say, all right? But what I'm getting at is there's a human component to this that we need to consider. And unfortunately, humans are prone to making mistakes. So this is really where, in many cases, the threat stems from, because people will walk down Wisconsin Center Drive over there, right? Pick up a thumb drive that says photos on it, go, I wonder whose photos, this is interesting, and put it in a laptop, probably corporate owned, piece of malware gets put on there. And if there's no way, if there's no segmentation between the user community and all that stuff, you've got a problem. Make sense? Okay. Jen? Oh, you're... Well, that I would advocate switch if you can. Sorry, firewall if you can. Right? Because these are gigantic zones. Right? Now, inside the IoT spot, we have Cisco-owned cells, industrial-grade switches that have the intelligence to do this. So inside of my IoT environment, I would expect to have some infrastructure that can perform that segmentation at a closet-to-closet, port-to-port type level. Right? What you need to do, though, is you also need to understand that communication might be allowed. I might have a policy that says I can talk to Jen's machine, or my machine can talk to Jen's machine, right? And that might be legitimate, But what if all of a sudden I go rogue and I decide to attack her machine? Something needs to get there to understand that's a threat and that the communication is off for some reason. What you also need to do is you need to identify the devices in the network. You can't rely on someone to say, that's what that is, and that's what it communicates to, right? You guys, IT administrators cannot be everywhere and everywhere at the same time. It's impossible. So that organization needs to be able to trust that if somebody were to put that device into a different switch or connect it into a different spot, something can identify it and keep it inside that segmented state. That's what these solutions, that's what, if you're familiar with the term access control, right? Or NAC, which is a term that if you're a security professional, you probably roll your eyes and go, I don't want to do that. It is time consuming, right? But this is the piece. When I work with organizations, they've already invested in a NAC solution, whether it's ours, ICE, Identity Services Engine, or somebody else's, but they haven't done anything with it. It's been shelfware for years. And I look at them, I'm like, you bought this thing 4 years ago, and all it's doing is authenticating people onto your wireless network. You're not using anything that enough of what this thing does. And yet you're complaining to me about how you just got breached. This is where it becomes an issue. And then you need to understand behavior. Everyone picks on Target. I don't want to pick on Target. So I'll pick on Home Depot. It's really the same thing. So the reason a Home Depot got breached, 3-4 years ago, is because they had a point of sale solution that all of a sudden started talking to the internet. Why? First of all, why was the point of sale solution even allowed to talk to the internet? Right? That was my first question, right? But ultimately, why did no one realize that the point of sale solution, which should, the way these things work is you swipe a credit card, it talks to a server. You swipe a credit card, it talks to the server, right? And it does it the same way, using the same language, the same ports and protocols, right? It doesn't just decide to change protocols or use a different language, right? It just over and over again. But all of a sudden in Home Depot, server, internet, server, internet, right? So now no one caught it. No one understood that shouldn't happen. One, they failed in the segmentation strategy because fundamentally that should never have been the case. Two, they didn't realize what was happening. Solutions like network behavior analytics detection, right, NBAD, will help with that, understanding workflows and ensuring that nothing is deviating from what is normal, right? All of this gets layered on, and we can talk about cloud aspects of this as well. But this is the focus. This is where you need to understand that there are investments to be leveraged here, and most organizations aren't effectively leveraging them today.
I think of it when I look at this, it's like a battlefield, and how are you aligning your troops and your security measures throughout?
I'll go with football, I think. So this is the offense.
Football.
This is the offensive line. That's the quarterback. Actually, that is kind of the quarterback. But yeah, this is what I ultimately see most often. There's infrastructure already in place. People aren't using them effectively. There are things that they're doing. Buying a new tool for a new widget because someone says it does this, that's a bad idea. The question you should be asking yourself is, do I have that capability already in-house? And can I use it that way instead? Right? Make sense?
Andrew, how
Yeah.
practical is it for an organization? Let's say it's even Cisco that's in there. Question one.
And what is microsegment? Is it by device? What does that mean? You lost me as a lawyer. Help me.
I'm really, my friends in Cisco are laughing at me right now because I'm really trying not to get this deep in the So when you start thinking about microsegmentation, you're thinking about the fact that we're in a very virtualized world in the data center, right? So it's how to segment in a virtualized space, how to do that in a manner that leverages more of an application focus.
Can't you just touch it and move it into a secure space? That's what we're looking for.
And that would be fine if I noticed that was the last talk you guys had was around the people problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a people problem here, and again, people make mistakes. Right? So there's not enough resources to maintain that. How many times have people sat in a cube and then plugged something in, realized that that's not working, and then moved it to a different port, right? It's in our nature to just figure out what the path of least resistance is and move it to whatever is available. Now that next port might be dedicated to a phone, right? Or dedicated to some level of access. It could be a contractor port that I've seen, right? If they did that, you can have a completely different level of access to this. So this is where you have to rely on the intelligence of the solutions available to you, and policy and governance controls inside of the technology to do that. So at Cisco, our micro-segmentation strategy is built around software-defined networking with a tool called ACI that allows us to understand and build things not the old way, which was I'm going to configure that to talk to that, and then I might put a firewall in place and I might restrict its access. And now instead it's saying, this is this type of server, this is this type of server. I'm not going to let it talk to one another unless someone tells me that that's allowed, period. And then it's doing it based upon context and not IP address. Who here knows every IP address or every phone in their phone, every phone number in their phone right now, right? No one. I don't even know my wife's phone number, in all honesty, right? When I call my wife, I say, hey, Siri, call my wife, right? So we need to get away from governing things based upon IP address. Now, IP address will never go away, but what we need to better understand is, what is that device? Is it a server? Is it a database? Is it an application server? Is it an IoT device? Is it a healthcare monitor? Is it an MRI machine? You need solutions to understand the context of those connections, and then let your network infrastructure work for you to use that context to make decisions. Absolutely. That's why you buy all Cisco. All right. No, let me address that real quick though. You don't have to buy all Cisco. It's a joke, right? But so what I've been advocating for at this point, and I said it earlier to somebody, I forgot who, there's no such thing as a homogeneous Cisco deployment period, right? You're always going to have to deal with interoperability, always have to deal with some level of thing. But that's back to the Sunday analogy, that's the sprinkles, the whipped cream, all these pieces, right? You can make decisions, but you got to build it off something, some base thing, right? So that's the vanilla ice cream, right? So everything I've talked about thus far, I've been trying to not make this a giant Cisco commercial, but everything I'm talking about and everything on this all works together today. So you can perform all these actions and do this down to the micro-segmentation level as well. So it's been proven, we can show it to you, but you have to first commit to, this is my strategy, right? This is the path I want to embark upon. This is what I want to do. And then I can help work with you. My team can help work with you. We have partners that can help work with you. This is where we address the people problem. You're likely not going to solve all these things with your staff of 2 or 3 folks, right? So don't hesitate to reach out and try to get services to work. Try to get a staff log, try to get a specialist that understands these elements, because there is a people problem in this industry, inside of IT as a whole. I read a metric, I forgot when I read it, but there's an 18-month retention period for a cybersecurity professional. More specifically to a SOC or IR guy, but 18 months. That means 18 months, they come on board, you train them. 18 months after you fully train them and they've accustomed, you've basically onboarded them, they have the ability to go find another job and double their salary. And because we're in Wisconsin and it gets cold here, they're going to move to one of the coasts, likely.
That's why I failed to mention new ways to bring women into and up through cybersecurity careers, which I passed this out because I attended something from NIST nationwide. And we had a session, was it 2 sessions ago? We did with Tina and others about cybersecurity, which was profiled in NPR. But yes, that is the very issue there. Did you find out information? One of the things we want to post on the Midwest Cybersecurity Alliance is salary related data. Did you find anything to post for all of us here in the community that you can all use?
One of the people that actually presented on that was Tech Systems, and they actually have a pretty good gathering of information. They pull it together from various sources, one being the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they've got a pretty good thing that we can put together and get it out on the website. So I'll ask.
I mean, for all of you that are trying to get more money before you jump and move, because that doesn't help any of us. Aaron's trying to pull together some stats to put on our website so that we can all use that at least from a local basis.
Absolutely. But there's a huge talent gap. Another statistic I read was that there are actually more cybersecurity jobs out there than folks studying cybersecurity roles at college. right? So if you've got, you know, a teenager who's looking maybe a little lost and doesn't have a job, push them down cybersecurity. If they've got a penchant for, you know, logic games, but don't want to code, if they have a penchant for cryptography or, you know, kind of a high math IQ, get them into cybersecurity because there's a lot to be had. And candidly, it is one of the more higher paying IT jobs out there. So
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I actually just talked about, the head of ISSA today, is looking for grants to fund students through. I mean, you know, there has been some things on the federal level about funding, but just to think about our local area, is there anything we can do from grants from a public-private perspective? I mean, I know ISA is thinking about that too. How could we fund students? And Ron, you bring a lot of students in. We need more students. Bring your students to these meetings.
There's actually 2 free camps this summer that Marquette is hitting. They're talking about having later on.
Yeah, if you give it to me, well, we'll send it through Earl. We'll send it off.
And I apologize. I know there's a question out there, and I've been talking a long time, so I want to try to get through my slides. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let me preface this by quoting a little ditty that I learned coming back from a Gartner program. And it said, when somebody tells you that you're going to regret this in the morning, your response should be, well, I will sleep until noon because I'm a problem solver. This week, it became publicly aware that the 2 articles in The Guardian describing state election voting systems prompted me to click on one of the hot links that took me to the FBI Cyber Watch. And I was wondering from Jennifer's perspective, given the variety of hacks, whether it's Nabisco, AKA Mondelez, or others, is there some clearinghouse that people can refer to establish a base point? So for example, there are vendors like Security Scorecard. And put this to Terry also, is the state laws getting to the point that if state of New York can pass legislation to resurrect state sovereignty as regards tax returns for a president, is there not some type of a clearinghouse that would allow individual enterprises to keep more up to date with the information as to whether or not from a legal perspective an existing enterprise has actually created a security scorecard that if they do not pull together, according to Andrew's idea of pulling together these different devices, that you can at least hold people more accountable instead of having such a patchwork?
Yes, I mean, I know that there are security frameworks that many organizations will require a vendor to go through. So if you think about vendor management, are you going to require them to be compliant with certain frameworks? Are you going to do a questionnaire? Are you going to audit them? Are you going to require them to do SOC audits, high trust audits? There's also third-party resources that essentially require the organization to fill out questionnaires and they rate them. To the level that you're talking about, I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if anybody else is.
Third-party risk is supposed to be a website you can go to say, is this vendor safe? And then Scorecard is continuing out there and posting, results. But I'm not sure, that's not the level that it's talking about, but that's the closest thing that's out there. And then there's websites that say what mobile apps are potentially secure and insecure. There's sites that post that too. Data that resides on your phone.
I don't think people care as much, but I do think as we become more sophisticated as a society and laws drive us there, that I do think that'll be more important, in particular with IoT and security by design. So when you're developing a product, you have to think about product liability, potential issues down the road about what are you embedding in the device. I mean, we'll talk about it, not in detail. I'm going to do light on the legal, but I mean, FDA has really considered that, before they approve a medical device. Go ahead.
Andrew, as we had talked earlier, me being in China and on the Huawei campus, not in the building, but just I came back and talked to my friends that are working with Cisco equipment, and I warned them way back a number of years ago of some of the dangers of nation-state actors interfering with the company, with Cisco. So now if we're trying to do all this stuff to protect ourselves, what is Cisco doing to protect against nation-state actors that might interfere with your equipment?
that interfere with our equipment?
Yeah, say like, the chips and stuff that Beijing is requiring some of the companies to put in, and that's why there's a big thing of nation states and theft of intellectual property. And so what is Cisco doing to actually protect itself before some of the stuff gets out?
It's a great question. So we do do a rigorous analysis of our devices before we certify them and let them go, right? There was rumors of a few years ago that I think I should say the FBI was actually intercepting Cisco routers and Cisco system solutions while being delivered to the organization, and then embedding some backdoor into that. It was right. Now we obviously, you buy something from me and my team, right? I'm not the one who delivers it to you directly, right? So there has to be a level of trust in between. When you buy something from Amazon, you're trusting the delivery guy to get to you in the right packaging, right? If something happens in between that, I can't control that. But we do certify and make sure that as things come out, there's definitely a large quality control element to our solutions. Are we doing full breach and penetration? We don't have the resources for that. Even big as wide as Cisco is, we can't do it for everything. But this is why we have contracts, and we have a large level of trust and making sure that these companies are staying true to us, and when we in the manufacturing side. But it's a fair question that unfortunately I don't have all the answers to. I'm going to close real quick because I know I've been talking much longer than I was supposed to. So again, segmentation, it's important. It's probably the most important thing you can do for your network. And right, zero trust is the topic du jour, the buzzword du jour these days. I agree with it. Right, zero trust should absolutely be part of your strategy. Right, you need to start thinking about multi-factor authentication as nothing, as you have to stop thinking of multi-factor authentication as nothing but a VPN technology. You have to start thinking about it from the perspective of, I have applications, I have systems that I need secure access to. What I've been doing with my organizations right now is telling them, listen, malware exists because of data and monetizing data. So if we can't solve the malware problem, we have to solve the access problem. So when you think about it from an IoT lens, right? You're going to have admins, you're going to have users, people are going to have access to things. Leverage multi-factor auth and zero trust to make that happen, right? Cloud, great example of that. So I can talk to me, pull me aside, we'll talk more about that because I want to get Jen and Aaron up here. But the last piece there, don't feel like you got to do this on your own. Cisco has 30 plus validated designs that allow for whatever type of industry, market, whatever you want to do. There's a link for it. We can get you these slides, but ultimately, a lot of times the design you're looking for already exists. So just look it up and we'll help you. And this is a template. These templates don't say go buy all Cisco. They say, if you want to do this particular use case, right? Here are the steps. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to invest in. Right. Thank you. I apologize for going long.
No, it's fine. We've had a really good discussion throughout. So I'm going to high level the legal requirements. Just bring the clicker. I'm good with that. I'm not going to walk around yet. So that's me. So when you think about the legal aspects, and this is what I was speaking about at the main FBI conference last week, you have to think about what technical strategic measures can you put into place, but you also have to follow the legal developments in the space, because let's be honest, the legal developments are just the minimal floor, but you need to understand where that minimal floor is, and you need to work with your in-house counsel, your outside counsel to understand, what those legal requirements are and what you are doing from a technical security perspective to meet those requirements. So we're going to highlight some of them. Many of you may have to comply with the GDPR, even if you're not located in Europe. If you're reaching out and marketing goods and services or doing active monitoring of EU residents, you do have to comply. The GDPR, bottom line, is very complicated when it comes to data security and privacy. Some of the issues with IoT devices are a couple things. One, you need to think about security by design procedures. They want you to think about data privacy impact assessments. How are you affecting the privacy of individuals if they're collecting data through the IoT device? Also with IoT devices, one of the issues is that users may not be able to get a privacy notice or consent when they're interacting with an IoT device, and the GDPR requires that. So if you're dealing with GDPR concerns, you got to think about how are we going to effectuate these requirements under the GDPR. The next issue is really the only state law issue you need to be worried about is California law. As we all know, California is very evolved. If you are a manufacturer offering devices to California residents, you need to equip them with reasonable security measures. Pretty broad. I mean, some of the things, what does that mean? I mean, usually we look to NIST. I'll talk about where the federal acts are going here. We look to NIST. We look to network segmentation. We think about what kind of passwords, authentication measures you need. But just so you know, California is on the forefront. There is an existing IoT law. I have it here on my desk if you want to see it. It's very, very basic. But other states are developing similar rules. Oregon is looking to, mimic California law. Go ahead, Terry. You want to say something?
There is a definition of reasonable coming out this summer. The Sedona conference will be publishing that.
And what is that reasonableness, Terry? No, from the Sedona conference.
Well, I can't say yet, but it's coming out.
But it also depends if California law accepts that reasonable determination, which they might, or they might look to NIST. But I mean, I just want you to be aware California is a player in this space. Their law is not, again, just affecting California-related companies, manufacturers that offer goods and services to California residents. We also have the CCPA, which we're going to be discussing in September, and maybe we'll roll back, talk a little bit about the IoT law when we talk about CCPA in California. Though, just so you know about the CCPA, there's, I think, 18, 19 amendments to that law that have not been finalized. We're watching them all. And Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious if you have like a IP-enabled camera and you're using footage from that in some sort of law court case, but it's been determined that there was no reasonable security provided to that device.
Are you saying a criminal lawyer could object about the obtaining of that evidence?
Yeah, would that have?
Yes, it could intersect, yes. But that's based on criminal law, whether someone could introduce that type of evidence. But I mean, reasonable security is something we always talk about because it's really hard to put your finger on and measure. But in IoT, we look to laws that are arcane because lawyers are way behind the technical developments. But you still have to make sure you comply with these, because if your IoT device has issues and you're not in compliance with these basic baby requirements coming out from the law, then you're at risk for class action suits. However, in California, there is no, under the CCPA there will be, but under the IoT laws, class action lawyers can't sue you, but they will think of a way of negligence. So I just want to highlight some things that are happening. There is a federal IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2009 that's out there. It's, when we say it's a paper tiger, there's a lot of requirements, but it doesn't say much. It essentially says we're going to work with NIST to develop requirements. If you do not already, I would definitely get on NIST listserv to talk about when they're offering comments. And really, you're not just commenting on behalf of your organization for IoT devices or whatever else, you're commenting on behalf of all the United States citizens and companies, because a lot of legal frameworks look to NIST. NIST has many different things they're issuing all the time, securing small businesses and home Internet of Things devices to manufacturers, et cetera. They're looking towards this. The UK has proposed a security by design law in October that we should be following. New York, Amsterdam, and Barcelona are doing coalition of digital rights. But in other words, bottom line is the legal developments are not robust yet on IoT, but they're changing. And as a minimum standard, you should be aware that these things are out there and your legal department should be following them. So now, right before we get into Aaron, which he's going to talk about some practical things that Rexnord has been doing, I talk about this framework, which again, it's not as robust as Terry's framework on duty of care, but there is this free resource that's out there. I have no allegiance to them, never talked to them, but it is something called AgeLight that's developed in particular with IoT that really just focuses on all these different legal requirements. Talk about California law, GDPR, what the FTC has said, what NIST has said. And so if you're developing a device by security by design, at least this is a checklist, and it's free. Just Google AgeLight. No relation to them, never spoke to them before. But for me, if I were reviewing a device from a legal perspective, I would look at a checklist like this just to make sure I check off all the legal requirements. Just may be useful. Wanted to throw it up there for you all. And now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. to talk about some practical aspects about how a company has dealt with developing IoT devices.
Great. Thanks, John. So I'm going to jump into this. So Rexnord IoT is part of something that we call Direction. Rexnord is built on a lot of different companies, as your larger conglomerates are nowadays. The one we're going to talk about today is actually part of our Falk series, and you guys probably know Falk Industries. They're over by Miller Park. So basically, they make really large drives. We take high-spinning electrical drive and gear it down to high torque. So this is our Direction digital platform. That we've got this big wheel here is kind of the graphic that we work with. But the part that we're talking about here in the kind of the circles on the lower left is the operate and maintain piece. The other parts are kind of like sourcing of it and so forth. But what this device does is helps the customer to operate and maintain their device. So Rexnord generally is built on two different platforms. We've got the Rexnord side and we've got the Zurn side. Zurn you've probably seen if you've been to a commercial restroom. You've probably seen our valves and other stuff in there.
What is that in there exactly?
Valves.
Okay.
Valves, yes.
How would we know those are Zurn?
Well, if it doesn't say Sloan, it's probably us. So anyway, our IoT device here is actually on these drives at customer locations, and it's designed to help with maintaining the health and the maintenance of this device. Some of these drives are $30,000, $40,000, and our customers want to make sure that they're running properly. They look for things like vibration, engine or oil viscosity, temperature, other things like that. And as I mentioned before on this earlier slide, all this stuff is available out on our website. I'm not giving away the store. You can see all of this stuff out there. And to what Andrew was speaking about earlier, these are the things that we're putting out there, those drives. And what we then do is we use two cloud platforms actually to gather the information and then massage it and put it out on a customer portal so that our customers can see what their devices are doing. There's also other things that we do with our device that is tied to this IoT device. Security was involved all the way through the process, from design all the way into actually production and maintenance of it. And we actually did a risk assessment of this solution, and we made sure that we went through and found those parts of the solution that needed some attention and made sure that it was not a risky solution. So as far as so if you look in the upper right-hand corner, that's essentially what one of those drives looks like. If you tipped that podium on its side, it would be about that big. The box on the left actually houses the IoT device, and the lights on top of it are actually connected to it that basically tell an operator how healthy it is. So it can communicates back to the IBM cloud over MQTT.
Aaron, can I ask you a question? When you say the IoT device tells the operator how healthy it is, what do you mean by healthy?
Sure. So the light on the top of it will basically indicate whether or not it's green, I'm running fine, everything's okay. Yellow, you should look at me, I need some maintenance probably in the near future. Red, something's very, very wrong and you should shut it down and fix it. It is.
Yeah.
It really is. Right.
I like that. Okay.
Right, exactly. So our system actually supports LAN or LTE. We don't do wireless with ours. We made that as part of our design. We didn't want that out in the floating around in the ether. In fact, as part of this, you'll see that no connection to the PLC. So he mentioned air gap earlier. There's an air gap there. You cannot control the device with our IoT. It looks at it and it sees what it's doing, but you can't turn it on and turn it off or make changes to it. That's by design. We don't allow that. You can't plug keyboards, displays, or other connect. Well, you can plug them in. They just won't do anything. It's actually programmed out of the device. You can't make a change to it. So.
Can I capture messages?
Can you capture messages? So you mean if you plugged a device into it? So the cellular device, we're relying on the security of the ether or the encryption that goes over the cellular back to the cloud. So. Yep. Oh yeah. It's all the messages are wrapped, so also, even if you did capture it, if you'll notice the second to last thing, there's no confidential information. What we're sending is basically 1, 2, 5, 8. So that only means something so 1 would be like vibration, and there'll be a number after it. You've just captured 12 digits. Congratulations. It means nothing to anybody because it's not going to have any information that is valuable to an attacker.
So somebody gets it, they would turn off a toilet in a restroom?
Well,
Just checking.
So I wanted to mention, and I'm going to back up here. So you'll notice we've got Zern and Rexnord. We actually have IoT solutions for both of those. We're speaking towards the Rexnord part here. There's a Zern part that I'm really don't speak towards because it's a lot different, and it's not something that really we're willing to talk about publicly, I guess. So we do different things with it, and it can be requires more security. So
No cameras,
no,
right?
not yet.
No.
Not that we would tell you about. So that's essentially the device itself. And again, the content of the message, even if it were unencrypted, you could steal it all day long and it wouldn't give you anything of real value. It means something to the customer because it contains information that they know what the proper range should be for something: a temperature, a viscosity rating, a vibration level. But to anybody else, it would just be a number. So the system itself, the IBM cloud is where we do the collection piece. The Azure cloud is actually where the customer portal lives. And we developed it in-house. We continue to develop it in-house. We use typical secure coding practices to go through it. We use industry standard frameworks to develop the code. We use versioning, code review, promotion, procedures, all that. We do use the Agile development process to actually develop the portal. And all the changes and everything go through CAB to make sure that everybody's aware of updates and changes that are made to the solution. And then with regards to Azure, that requires MFA to get into the admin side of it. You cannot get onto the admin portal without MFA. So. It's two-factor, yeah. Yep.
Aaron, that was really helpful. I mean, I want to hear what other people have to say too about what they're doing about security by design with IoT devices.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is possible or not, but so it's a theoretical. So with that drive, so it's sending out a signal via cell to the customer as far as the performance of the drive itself. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to? I mean, it's an open portal. Is there a way somebody could attach something into that message that would end up going back to the customer and then infecting the customer at all?
No, because it doesn't actually communicate back. It sends it out. There's no message back to the device itself.
What I'm thinking you said is like spoofing, right? So you think it's messages coming from that device, and the bad guy gets
Right.
in it.
So if
You
I
have to know a lot about your internal.
Right. Another part of this too, if we back up, the authentication of the device to the cloud is actually via an SSL key and its own serial number. You have to know our range of serial numbers for that device to touch it.
Is that publicly available? You're so,
No,
okay.
no. One other thing that I wanted to mention, the top part here is the device itself. If you're concerned about, and Andrew brought this up earlier, this is actually, if you look at his big slide with a bazillion names on it, one of those is one that we use for a third-party solution that actually provides the device itself. And they do all of the loading of the OS, making sure it's patched, everything like that. We don't have to do that in-house. That's done outside third-party for us. so that we are ensured that it's up to date, it's patched, the vulnerabilities are remediated before they're brought online. Is the key on the device? The key is pulled down with the operating system and the app with itself. So it doesn't communicate back to the portal until it gets the key.
Question here, 2 parts. These devices, given your awareness of your competitors, is your capability here atypical or typical of the state of the art? And the second, do these devices qualify to have their own separate EAL or evaluation assurance level as tested by SAIC on a 1 to 7 scale in terms of hackability?
So with regards to industry standard, we believe that we're out in the front of this area. So we think we're probably ahead. I would have to get a response for your second question. I don't know the answer to that. So I'd have to get you a response with that. So I don't know.
Can you talk a little bit about how your security organization actually supported the design process? Because to me, I think that's a huge differentiator when you're competing with someone like Sloan, for example. And I think a lot of times security gets shortchanged because they're patching and doing all that fun stuff. But in this case, it sounds like security was actually supporting your line of business.
Yep.
That's a big differentiator. Can you talk a little bit about how you got that team involved and how that worked for your organization?
Sure. So when this initiative was spun up, obviously, anytime you do something like this and you have to involve your IT department, this is something that had to be a collaborative piece, and security was brought to the table immediately when they talked about this. Yes, you will need to design this with security in mind.
Who brought you to the table? Was it the business? Was it the engineer? I mean, who brought you?
It was from if I'm not mistaken, I believe our CIO brought it to the table. So it came from the IT side of the house, but the business was completely on board with it. And I don't think that they would have done it any other way. But you're right, it's a differentiator in that it was baked into the process from the beginning. The thing with that is that when you're designing it like this, as security professionals know, it's much harder to go back on the back end and bolt on security than if it's baked in on the front end of it. So a lot of this was, a lot of the choices that were made were made with security in mind as we went forward with the project. So, does that answer your question?
It does, but you win more business over Sloan.
Well, see, this is not Zurn. This is Rexnord. I can't give you any sort of numbers on the other side of. Right.
Do other companies do this similar process? I mean, it is required by GDPR, but if you're not subject to GDPR, then you don't have to do it. But I mean, it seems like common sense, especially with potential product liability issues when we talked about medical devices, in particular in the healthcare space that don't have legacy issues. I mean, it just, to me, from a legal perspective, seems like this is best practice. And if you're not doing something, at least to prove this, then you're negligent in your product development process. But I mean, you don't have to say, oh, we don't do anything at our organization. But I mean, would people generally say this is something businesses are starting to consider? Because I mean, from where I sit as a lawyer, it definitely is something that you would have to consider at a minimum.
I think we typically see that they're not involved because that is supporting the line of business. But we've seen companies that are in growth industries, those are the ones that are taking.
Yep.
I believe it's competitive.
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I've got an engineering background and mechanical engineering and now program management. And there are companies that are not thinking about this.
How can they not? I guess maybe it's just my space. I see it everywhere, even by law, which lawyers are slow. So if lawyers are seeing it, by God, I don't know how businesses are not seeing it. Yeah. Exactly.
But there are some other companies, you can be a $2 billion company or naive to it.
Until they get exposed at Black Hat, Which we've had, I mean, there's tons of derivative lawsuits that come from that. And then they start thinking about the manufacturing process and the contracting process, et cetera.
Getting involved on the checklist for their projects, you know, it's.
Well, how could we educate more about that? I mean, I think we should think about that as a group. So it's not like, hey, I'm annoying, I'm a security professional. Like, how could we educate businesses more about that? It's actually, I mean, and Aaron, I would ask you, how much effort did it actually take? I'm sure it was more fun for you than patching or thinking about it. I mean, it's like, hey, we're building something here. I mean, I'm sure, you know, engaging CISOs and others, this is something that people want to do from an intellectual perspective. I mean, how do you think we could educate more businesses to do that?
Yeah, I think you definitely need to educate the business side of it more from the technical side, because they have to understand that it's going to cost you more down the line to do it the wrong way than it is to bake it in on the front end and involve the correct IT people.
We need surveys about that. Cisco, come on, get us some surveys about that. Who, do you guys have some questions? I've never heard from you yet, so I'm calling on you. Sure. Previous list.
So what I saw is that it just looks like you're doing mostly best practices, and I'm wondering if you did the in-house development in terms of, because you'll probably, we're all in minds in your system, but like, I would imagine you put your public key on your device that's not in-house, and it's not communicating with the user, basically dealing with your cloud service, which is your server or something. So I mean, your design team do any kind of in-house development of software that actually that's on top of the public domain?
So it's primarily best practice. So to answer your question, no, most of this is built off of industry standard best practice authentication along that line. So no, we're not making new encryption keys, if that's what you're asking. No. Yeah, no. We are not doing that. We are using existing proven technologies for this area.
And let me ask you, if you had a data breach and the regulators came at you because you harmed someone, individuals or other businesses, how would you prove that you met best practices? Because that's where, from a legal side, where we are.
Well, one of the
Well, I'm
reasons.
not questioning. You know, I'm just saying this is for all of us to think about.
No, I mean, I would say that we do have a defensible position, definitely.
Yeah.
But, I mean, using the industry best practice, the accepted what the industry considers best practice. Yeah.
Yes, all this is under standard.
Yep.
Question?
Comment, Jennifer, in terms of how do we top of this essentially? To connect the dots between Andrew's comment about and Cora Lewandowski's book, Let Trump Be Trump. Most recently, Let Boeing Be Boeing, and by software design, in terms of impact on a corporate brand, start looking at software design that did not include safety features, forgetting cybersecurity for them, just the liability of making safety features optional on a plane that costs how many billions of dollars, and it's something a few thousand.
Interesting, my meeting last Thursday was at Boeing's headquarters in DC. And my good friend works for Boeing that was there. But I mean, 100% to that piece. And I will tell you, it's not a scare tactic. I'm not a plaintiff's lawyer. I've always represented corporations. But the plaintiff's bar is watching the space, in particular with CCPA. And I do think that that is going to be more of our new negligence and the way in which, you know, plaintiffs' lawyers go after product liability, because for that very reason is that it's almost, you know, why did, you know, the spaceship blow up back in the 80s? You know what I mean? It's the development process, and are we skipping steps? And so for me as a lawyer, it's very concerning that there's not any sort of product development, security by design, even if it's a little bit, and not thinking about that because it's so obvious, but I guess it's still in the nascent state. So I think we should think about as an organization how to educate others.
Yeah, jumping back into the Cisco presentation, I think that I've been skimmed over that a lot of this could only solve with the network segmentation process with the engineer proprietary technology, just all of these things that are free and implemented in literally everything in the music program. And that's where the legal basis is, because none of these require you to go outside what you're special.
And that's what people think about, like, what is the legal liability if you don't patch, and I think just about phishing attacks and people don't turn on security controls to log. I mean, it's just like, that's why I think cybersecurity really isn't just a technical approach. It needs to be somebody looking at it from a strategic approach, saying, are we implementing all the security measures that are there that currently exist, whether you're switches or, whatever else? Because if and nobody on the plaintiff side understands it really the way that I do, but you never want me to go on the plaintiff side because I understand all these login controls, but I do think to myself, like, didn't someone think through, why wouldn't we turn those things on, or why that is negligence? Go ahead.
Yeah, but I think the challenge is for some of these marketplaces, they're looking for, I'll just make up a number, a $200 device. And all of these other precautions, they're up here at the $1,000.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you gotta make a decision of how much security you can get in $200 devices. That's what the market demands.
And there's no question that budget plays a part in and it's a big part of the decisions in many cases. The security budget, if you look at the overall IT budget, is a rounding error in many organizations, right? That's got to change, especially if we're going to go down this. And talking about the idea of addressing it. A lot of folks they think of from the lens of it's not a problem until it's a problem, until we can effectively prove that it's an issue. That's when they'll make a change. That's why we're seeing a lot of practices built around IoT pen testing. Again, we have one at Cisco. I've got at least 4 partners I can think of that are doing it as well. And again, kudos to these organizations that they're saying, you know what, maybe we should pen test this thing, because I might not have somebody with that skill set here, but Cisco might have one, or so-and-so might have one. And then so show me where we're vulnerable.
And to me, that just seems best practice before you put into the marketplace. And I will tell you from the legal side, when they come and ask me, I say the same thing. Have somebody test this to say, hey, at least it passed a pen test, vulnerability scan, whatever you want to do, so that we can show it as a baseline that we did something. It's not even that much money to do that very often. But,
Yep.
I see the same side of it as well. So anyway, that's why we started this organization. That's why the whole point of what we're doing here. Go ahead. You have a question? Go ahead. Bad passwords, as in they could have. There's like 35 laws in California about paying individuals for selling data. There's 18 different amendments. Frankly, good for them. They've got a lot of tech companies are up there. They're more attuned to the issues. I think people think about California as an island, but actually a lot of the California law does apply to many businesses throughout the country, which is what Terry and I are going to be talking about in September.
Well, yeah.
Do you have a question?
Well, just like you can't secure against stupid, you can't legislate against stupid either. The thing that we did too, especially with our, as it relates to pen testing, you can use that as a marketing tool. You can come back around and say, this thing was pen tested. We know that this thing was secured. They threw everything at it that they could, and it's secure. And that's what you want to do with whatever device that you're thinking about doing, is make sure that you get that validation from an outside group that can say, yes, this thing is rock solid, and here's the proof.
The other point I want to make is, like, 2 years after you released that product, and now some other vulnerabilities get published on, I don't know, SQL Express or whatever you use. And then you say, oh, heck, what do I do now? I got 10,000 or 30,000 out in the field. Am I going to do a recall? No one's gotten to the device. So, so there's all these other things also when you get to
And also the only thing I would offer, because I do a lot of M&A and due diligence work, the only thing that gets your company is if we're going to sell this, you know what I mean? If we're going to take this to market to sell, and you're in an M&A transaction, showing that it was pen tested may be very good or lucrative. Buyers will be very happy if you can show that there was a pen test and a vulnerability. Still in the due diligence side, but that catches business people's minds because they think about, how are we going to make money from selling? this business.
But there's another, support of it, and that's also.
Yes.
It's part of what has to go into your design. When you're looking at it on the front end is, okay, so you're going to get it out into the field. How are you going to support this?
The support is really where the legal issues come up, and no one has a succinct answer to that. How long should you support after the device goes into the market, whether it's B2B or B2C? Does anybody else, you have a question back here?
Well, more of a comment, right? I mean, I think as security professionals, we spend most of our time in prevention and remediation. IoT, I think the recommendation would be twofold. If you're a security professional, I would encourage you to seek out your product development teams. That's how you can get involved in that design process. That would be a best practice that would start to adapt that learning and doing some things. Hold their team in, but when I think about the cumulative knowledge of our security professionals, not to offer to the product dev teams that can bridge that gap to do it. On the other side of the house, if you're here because IoT and product dev, I would encourage you to go reach out to your security teams and say, what kind of project we need a competitive advantage. May not necessarily be fast to market, but we'll protect margins and we'll protect your people want to know that the products they're buying are safe.
And the last point, we'll take questions afterwards. We'll end because I know some people want to go. But it's not just security and safety. It's also privacy as well, which that's becoming even, I would say consumers are getting more mad about privacy with Facebook and other related issues than just the security and the safety. People are getting very concerned about what information these devices are taking. So we will be up here afterwards. We wanted to thank you so much. We're going to take a break over the summer. Please share all your thoughts. Again, this organization is a nonprofit. None of us make money. We're just trying to figure out, ways to solve all of these issues. I thank you so much, Andrew and Cisco and Aaron and, from Rexnord. And we appreciate all of your support. If you've got questions, please come up afterwards. And thank you. There's materials also out on the front desk. The September meeting, we don't have a date. And on this point, so we're at Foley and Lardner, the September meeting will be fine. The November meeting, we have it's beautiful view, but our office is very old. We have renovated in many eons. It's actually nice up here. If you went down and saw our legal offices, you thought somebody died down there. So we are actually renovating our entire offices. So we're trying to check dates, but if we don't, September will be definitely up here. We don't have a date set yet. We'll be notifying you about that via email. But then we probably will hold the other meetings downstairs, maybe in the cafeteria when our 40th floor is under construction. So thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Have a great summer. Enjoy warm weather. Thank you.